I can start with my opening statement. Isn't that right? Okay,
You can start. 10 minutes is fine with you.
okay, brother. Okay. So the debate is on the problem of evil. My name is Socrates Son, first of all. I am from Greece. I have a YouTube channel called Socrates Son. And I recently came across my interlocutor's YouTube channel, which is Refuting Orientalists, it was a very good channel. I was impressed with his arguments. And okay, so my channel is Socrates Son. And today we will be debating on the problem of evil. So I will make some kind of opening statement. So the problem of evil was firstly articulated by the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus in 341 BC. Epicurus is considered the first famous atheist philosopher in history. So he's some kind of the father of atheism. I don't know. So anyway, so he was atheist. The classical formulation of the problem of evil goes something like this. So Epicurus said, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. In other words, all powerful. Not willing, then he is malevolent. In other words, he's having some kind of wish to do evil. Is he both able and willing? Then why commit evil? Epicurus wondered. Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Since then, there were responses to this argument, pointing out that God can allow evil that leads to a greater good. Therefore, in the grand scale of things, he is in fact good. But in the grand scale of things, and inferring to God's attributes like justice, wisdom, omniscience, and so on. So God hasn't got only one attribute. He's just moral. He's also just. He's got wisdom, omniscience, and so on. Some give alternative definitions of morality. Okay, morality might be the ontological. In other words, it might not relate to consequences of actions in the real world. It might be morality. It just might be obeying arbitrary rules. So also in this case, this argument doesn't work. One second, please. Yes, so the classical formulation of the problem of evil, although presents an interesting philosophical question, it doesn't work in a deductive way. In other words, it doesn't disprove God in an absolute sense. Can we therefore say the problem of evil is not a significant argument against God? No, according to countless pastors, imams, philosophers, and common people in history who struggle with the problem of evil. The problem of evil is a significant reason causing people to doubt God. So even if the problem of evil doesn't disprove God absolutely, it certainly can make God not reasonable to believe. So the argument now becomes, is it reasonable to believe that an all-powerful, all-loving, and merciful God orchestrates the type of suffering and evil we see in this world? One might go investigating whether God exists is to reconcile his wisdom in creation, or better, recognize a consciousness underlining this world. What are some characteristics of consciousness? Efficiency and moral consideration. Yet the world seems to be wasteful, lamely pragmatic, and randomly cruel. Something that makes perfect sense in the evolutionary model of this world, but makes little sense if the world was made by a moral intelligence. The type of evil we see in this world is sadistic, random, and although suffering is vital for disclosing certain values to us and build our character, much evil in this world is mindless and doesn't bring closure. Certainly not in the animal world, where we only see random and often sadistic suffering. So now I will make some kind of argument. If God could have done a potential world with less evil and still serve his ulterior plan, that would have made him evil. Therefore, we can only assume that God's moral plan is the best conceivable moral plan. First of all these kind of arguments I will make, I will repeat them again slowly. Okay, I'm not expecting to understand them on the spot. Okay, they might be confusing. So my argument is that if God could have done a potential world with less evil and still serve his ulterior plan, that would have made him evil, because he's more evil than less evil. Therefore, we can only assume Allah's moral plan is the best conceivable moral plan. So, but although we cannot know the mind of God, there are certain things we do know about the moral plan of a specific God called Allah. This world is a test. The cause of Allah is establishing the deen of Allah in this world, regarding what Allah demands of his servants and establishing his right to have his servants worship only him. And he punishes people who fail in this test for eternity and rewards people who pass this test for eternity. But is it reasonable to believe this moral system is the best conceivable system? It doesn't seem so. Okay, there is no free will in Islam. Allah guides whom he wills. He destines people to hell while they were still in their father's loins. And why should Allah test people in the first place when he is the one who creates them deficient? Allah doesn't test morality, in other words, good or bad, in an intuitive way. He tests adherence to arbitrary cult rules and rituals. He forgives all sins to his servants and makes the deeds of unbelievers in vain. He cares about worship, not morality. He then punishes eternity in hell for finite crimes, therefore unjust and immoral. Allah doesn't seek to maximize well-being, but to serve his own vanity, okay, to serve his own ego and political plan for this world. The point I'm trying to demonstrate is that Allah's supposed wise ulterior plan doesn't seem just or wise, therefore not reasonable to believe. Okay, so that will be my opening statement. Can you hear me? So to continue, Mohammed, are you there? Guys, I don't know. Maybe I was talking to myself for all this time. Mohammed, my dear friend, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear my dear friend?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you, my dear friend.
Hello?
So yes, I can hear you, my dear
Hello?
friend. Yes, yes, can you hear me?
I, actually, there was a problem with my internet. I think I was messaging again and again. For some reason, it didn't show up. I couldn't hear your opening statement.
Oh, you didn't hear me.
I'm really sorry, but you would have to repeat it because
No, I have to repeat. Okay, never mind. I just
there was
made.
a problem with I think you will have really sorry.
Yeah, I can, my dear brother,
Hello?
I can hardly hear you myself. Yeah. Yes, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yes, yes.
Yes.
So what I did
Okay.
is just what I did, my dear friend, is I just made some general points about the problem of evil. It was not like anything significant. I can repeat that in our conversation, my arguments. It was kind
Okay.
of general points about the problem of evil. If you like to make your opening statement, we can try if you can work
Okay.
the problems. Okay.
Okay. I will start my opening statement. Give me a moment.
Of course, certainly. And if you cannot, my dear friend, we can arrange this debate for another time. It's not a when you fix your technical problems. It's not a problem for me.
Uh, it's fine with me, but can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yes, you can try with your open to make your open statement.
Okay. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. In today's debate, basically we are discussing problem of evil. Now, my position is that basically belief in the atheist argument from problem of evil does not work because it is based on subjective value judgments. More than that, I think the atheist belief in the problem of evil, because it's based in subjective value judgments, is nothing but blind faith. Now, let's start with the problem of evil. Generally, any problem of evil argument basically goes like this: there is unnecessary pain and suffering in the world, or seemingly pointless pain and suffering in the world. A merciful God would not have created pain and suffering like this. Hence, at least a merciful God does not exist. Now, the the main problem, the fundamental problem with this, there are two issues with this. One, I think to this point, any atheist will agree this does not prove that an intelligent, powerful, willful creator does not exist. So it's not an argument for atheism per se. It is only argument for basically God being merciful if God exists. This is something I don't think anyone will disagree with. Now, here's why the problem of evil does not work, because it assumes that God would do things a certain way without having any way to prove it. For example, this argument assumes if God exists, evil wouldn't exist or suffering wouldn't exist, and it assumes that suffering and evil are unlikely, or suffering is evil, basically, that death is evil, and that these things wouldn't exist given theism. But this is just a subjective value judgment, and I can go onto a general theism, or this does not refute general theism, but I'll stick with just Islamic theism for this debate. Islamically, the purpose of life is basically this life is supposed to be a test with hardship and pain and suffering for the people, and to see who is righteous. So, here's the basic reason why fundamental reason why problem of evil cannot work against Islam. Why? Because if Islam is correct, evil and suffering would exist in the world. They are a part and parcel of this world. In fact, they are part of the intention behind this world. Evil and suffering exist. So this cannot be used as an argument against Islam for their fundamental reason, because if Islam is correct, suffering and evil would be there. But problem is the atheist have to show then if that doesn't make sense. More than that, there's another problem here. The problem of evil assumes that suffering is evil. This is just a subjective value judgment. You can't actually prove suffering is evil. You can't actually prove death is evil. You can't prove there is unnecessary suffering, because a lot of the atheists, because they realize that they're simply just saying that suffering exists, and that's wrong, that doesn't work. They will say unnecessary suffering exists. But problem is the atheists have to show then if there is unnecessary suffering, and if that is necessary, according to which criteria is that suffering unnecessary. More than that, there's another problem here. Atheists cannot show anything is good or bad, right or wrong, good and evil. If they can't do that, then how are you going to claim that some things are evil and they shouldn't exist, or that suffering does not exist. All of this, at the end of the day, is nothing but subjective value judgments. And by the way, it is my position that when someone makes a criteria, they would have to prove it, right? Why should I'll make one criteria here. Subjective value judgments are not arguments. And I'm happy to argue for this point because anything that is subjective, it's not true. It's like arguing which flavor of ice cream is better, vanilla or chocolate. It's just subjective. It can't be used as an argument. Now, one thing can be done. The atheist can try to do that. Problem of evil contradicts Islam, but then, or Christianity or any other religion or particular form of theism they are arguing against. But in that case, atheists would have to show contradictions. So I think this is my opening statement here. We can start with the discussion.
Okay, great. That was very good. Okay, so now we go to the discussion part. Okay, we are done with the opening statement. So my question to you, my dear sir, is that if an argument is not deductive, in other words, disproves or proves something in an absolute sense, does that mean it's not a good argument? In other words,
I don't think
yeah,
it needs to be.
you understand what I'm.
Okay, finish your question then. I'll.
So what I'm trying to say, first of all, I conceive the problem of evil as classically articulated by people like Epicurus doesn't work deductively. In other words, it doesn't absolutely disprove Islam. It doesn't work deductively for the reasons you very nicely just articulated in your opening statement. Okay, so I can potentially articulate the problem of evil in another way and pin it down to effective reasoning and might work deductively. But that is besides the point. The point is that we don't need to prove something in an absolute sense in order to be a good argument. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that.
Bravo. So so I can give reasons that the problem of evil is a significant problem for God, and that makes God not reasonable to believe. Okay, so and moreover, the the problem of evil. So you said something that you will take the view of Islam, isn't that right? You will take the view of Islam. You will make an argument related to Islam. So it's
Just
not.
in this debate, just in this
So if you
debate.
do that, it's not anymore about a deist kind of God. It's about the Islamic God specifically. And we know many things about the moral system of the Islamic God. Okay, so for example, we know, as you also said, the world is a test. Isn't that right? We know we know what is the cause of Allah in this world. I will make a definition of the cause of Allah in this world, and you will tell me if you agree with that definition.
Can you just repeat the last 10 seconds? It was a bit
Yeah,
unclear.
yeah. What I said is that although in the deist kind of God we don't know, it's kind of a mystery. We don't know what is His moral plan. But when it comes to Allah, we have specific things that we do actually know about the moral plan or moral system of Allah. For example, as you said, the world is a test. You agree with that, isn't that right? The world is a test.
Yes,
So we,
yes.
we so we do know something about God's system, moral system. So first thing we know is that the world is a test. The other thing we know is the cause of Allah in this world is establishing His deen and what He demands of His servants. Okay, in this
What did
world
you say?
and establish
Establishing his name?
His deen,
Establishing his theme?
the deen of Allah, the deen, the community of Allah, the deen of Allah.
Dean. Okay, okay, okay.
Deen,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
the community of Allah. Okay, so that okay. So the other, and what he demands of his servants, which is to worship only him. Isn't that right? So this is what Allah considers very significant. Worship, people worshiping only him. We
Yes,
also know, okay, so we also know that he then punishes people for eternity in hell. Okay, so we also know that about the plan of Allah. Okay, so what I can do
yes.
is criticize these three things and establish that they are not reasonable. For example,
Yes,
uh, okay, so the world is a test, but although Allah says that this world is a test, there is no free will in Islam. Allah guides whom He wills and destines people to hell while they were still in their father's loins. Do you agree that there is
I
no?
agree that Allah does these things for us, but I disagree with there being no free will in Islam. Islamically, free will exists and the will of Allah, the qadar of Allah, both exist. So it is simply false that the claim that there is no free will in Islam. Both things exist in Islam.
Yes, but so at least you don't have libertarian free will. Is that right? Libertarian, in other words, is not absolute free will. It's some kind of compatibilism. Do you agree? Compatibilism. Do you know this term? So, sorry, because I put now I went to free will, so it's kind of unfair to you if you are not familiar with this argument. So, but how can this world be a test when you don't have?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Now I can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
me?
Your voice cut out for about 10-15 seconds. Now I can hear you.
Okay, so my first point is that when you say that the plan or the system, the moral system of Allah includes a test, I will then say that is not reasonable to believe that he is just then, because in Islam there is no libertarian free will, there is no absolute free will. So and people are born to go to hell, or are destined to go to hell while they were still in the father's loins. So how the world being a test makes sense more?
Okay.
Yeah, can you? So I will let you speak now.
Okay. First, I'll just right saying
Eh,
is that yeah, okay. What you are birth before our birth, right? That who is going to hell and who isn't. Then the test concept does not make sense because it's a rigged test or a fixed test basically. That's what you're trying to say.
yeah.
This is your point, right? Okay. Okay. I'll address this point now. Firstly, it's not a completely rigged test because there is a will. As for Allah deciding in the basically before the womb, right? That is not because Allah is choosing pre-planned who's going to hell and who isn't completely. That is because Allah knows what people are going to do. Although there is some choice of Allah involved as well, but like I said, it's not one thing or the other. Both things are involved here. There is predestination involved as well, and there is the choices of people which affect their answers as well. Both things are involved. So just because uh, a person basically before their birth it's written whether they're going to heaven or hell, right? This does not mean that is completely without any choice of humans, without any test of humans. It is just purely based on the qadar of Allah. It's not like that. There is still human choice involved, and it is written, at least that's how it seems to me, both based on the will of Allah and the actions a person takes, the choices a person makes. So that would be my response to this point.
Okay, thank you. Although I'm personally not convinced because as I read the Islamic sources, it doesn't. It seems, first of all, it seems that Islam advocates for not compatibilism. How you say that? That determinism. But nevertheless, because the issue of free will is a very big subject, so I don't see how we can resolve that right now. But that is one reason why I think that Allah is unjust, because the concept of test doesn't seem logical to me. It fails in this part. Then I will say that Allah doesn't really test morality, good or bad. He tests adherence to his cult, to his rules and rituals. So let me be more precise. He forgives all sins to his servants and makes the deeds of unbelievers in vain. Okay, so he, in a sense, cares only about worship and not morality. So how? Okay, can you understand? So Allah doesn't care about good and bad. He cares about worship. So first of all, do you agree that Allah um, forgives all sins to believers when it comes to believers? Okay, so to continue,
Hello? Yeah, I'll
yes,
respond to that. Uh, the Islamic position is that if a Muslim does sins,
mm,
right? It is possible that Allah may forgive him, or it is possible that that Muslim will suffer some time in hell, a limited time, a finite time in hell to pay for those sins, right?
yes,
Then that Muslim goes into paradise. The position of the kafir is, according to Islamic position, that a kafir who knows about Islam, right, and then he dies, that person is always in hell. So that's the Islamic position.
exactly. Okay, so all believers will go to hell, to heaven eventually, as you said. So Allah forgives all
Yes.
sins. Essential, yes. Okay, let me repeat. Let me ask you a direct question. Do all believers, all Muslims, will eventually go to heaven?
Yes.
Okay, so all Muslims will eventually go to heaven no matter what they did. In other words, what you just said, my dear friend, is that ISIS will eventually go to heaven. Okay, this is what you said right now. Okay. Uh, uh,
Who
the,
will
the
eventually
other
go to
point,
heaven? Can you repeat?
okay, what you just said right now, my
Uh,
dear friend, is that,
your voice cut out a bit.
yes, what you just stated is that ISIS, the terrorist group ISIS, and people
ISIS.
like Al
ISIS.
Qaeda, okay, you agree that they
Yeah.
will eventually go to heaven. Is that right?
If they die as
So,
Muslims, yes.
yes. So okay. So Allah says in the Quran, also says in the Quran, that all the unbelievers, He will make their deeds in vain, and all the unbelievers will go to hell, essentially. Okay, if they die,
Yes.
okay,
Yes. Socrates, can I just address one point here? And you can tell
yes, of
me whether
course.
that's your position or not. Right? So it seems to me that your argument here is that Allah is not doing things by a particular moral standard, an independent moral standard. Allah is doing things by who adheres to Islam or not. So your basically contention or your argument or your issue is that a Muslim does however many sins, at the end they will, even after serving some time in hell, they will end up in paradise. But a kafir, right, even if he gives a lot of charity, helps a lot of people, that if he knowingly rejects Islam, that person will end up in hell forever. This is basically your entire point, right?
Yes, this is my point, but why is that? And I say that doesn't make reasonable to believe that the system of Allah is just or fair or moral. Okay, so that makes it not reasonable to
Can you
believe.
respond to this point more?
So what I
Hello?
yes, what I'm
Okay. Okay, finish your point, then I'll respond.
my point is, first I made an argument and you already agreed. If you remember, you already agreed that an argument doesn't need to be deductive or disprove something in or prove something in an absolute sense in order to be a good argument. And you agreed. Okay, for example, let me give you an example. We cannot prove the earth is round in an absolutely. But if the Quran says the earth is flat, that's a good argument against the Quran. Isn't that right? Let's say theory, we, let's say, for example, as an example, the Quran said that
Yeah,
the
I
earth is
agree with your
flat.
point. If the Quran said the earth was flat, it would be a good argument against Islam. I would agree with
Okay,
this.
okay, okay. So now with what you have just agreed, now we went away from a deductive argument. In other words, me trying to prove things in an absolute sense, and we went to effective reasoning. In other words, now I will give you reasons, okay, reasons why the system of Allah is not reasonable to believe. Okay, but and now I gave you one reason. You already said that ISIS, a very apparently immoral group, will end in heaven. And good people, as you just said, will eventually end in hell. So is it reasonable to believe that is the best conceivable world? No, it's not reasonable at all. Isn't that right?
Okay, so I'll respond to this argument now, the entire argument, right? This, like I said, I don't agree that I agree with you that the argument does not have to be deductive. Both of us agree on this, right? But here's the thing: I think where we disagree on an argument has to be objective. It can't be subjective because at the end of the day, subjective value judgments are worthless. It is as stupid as arguing which flavor of ice cream is better, vanilla or chocolate, which color is better, blue or green. I mean, that's all subjective. You can't have subjective value judgments and pretend they are arguments. The argument has to have some sense of objectivity in it. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. It's not a debate, it's just whining. Now, I'll go to the entire point, right? About your own argument. Your argument is that basically Allah does not adhere to some independent moral standard, and other than that, what Allah does is that Allah just sends people to heaven or hell based on how much they adhere to Islam or not. Right? Okay. So, firstly, again, the problem with the problem of evil is it's making claims, it's making objective claims about how Allah should do things and should not do things. But this is just a subjective claim. This is subjective. No one in their right mind will disagree with that. This is subjective. Even if you think it's problem or not, whatever, at the end of the day, it is subjective. Now, the another issue I think with your argument is that the claim is that there is some objective standard independent of God that God should adhere to and that people should adhere to. I think you will have to prove there is some objective standard independent of God. There is no objective morality outside of God. What God says is, at least that's Islamic position. What God says is moral, and what God says is immoral is immoral. You can't have subjective value judgments. What you're doing is, uh, you're doing that God should have done things according to a particular criteria, moral criteria, whatever that criteria is. Maybe it's liberal morality, maybe it's something else. And God shouldn't have done things the way Islam says God would have done. This is all subjective. For your argument to work, you would have to do two things. First, you would have to make a case for why God should act in a particular way instead of another way. Secondly, you would have to prove that liberal morality is objective. If it's subjective, then the problem of evil it's dead because it is just subjective. I mean, think about this. Even if we both agree, right, that our argument does not have to be deductive, we would both agree that arguing which color is better, blue or green, is a waste of time. If we are just going by intuition, then subjective value judgments, right? We can't pretend those are arguments. So that would be my response. You can respond now.
Okay. So first of all, we need to agree with how we get to know things. For example, as humans, okay, we are, because of the inevitable human state, the only way to know things and to investigate things is effective reasoning. In other words, use reason and empirical evidence, logical evidence and empirical evidence. Okay, so that is the only way we have as human beings, because of the inevitable human state, to investigate things. So I am using now the only effective method we have to investigate things, which is effective reasoning. Okay, that is not subjective. Okay, it's the only way, the only, in fact, objective way we have to investigate things is through reason and empirical evidence. So when I make reasonable arguments and I give empirical evidence about reality, that is not me overstating my boundaries, my intellectual boundaries. In fact, it's the complete opposite. That is, in fact, me being truthful to intellectualism, and the only, in fact, objective way we have as humans to investigate things. Then you said about objective morality. Every moral system can be objective as long as we qualify the system. Let me explain. For example, let's say now I invent a moral system and I call it. Let's say I invent a religion right now and I call it Socrates Son religion. I have a moral system that says that murder is good. Now, if you make the statement that according to Socrates Son's religion, murder is good, that is an objective statement. Why? Because you qualify it according to to Socrates Son religion. You said that's the qualifier. So, okay, so it's not about objectivity, in fact, it's about true definitions. Okay, so I think you confuse objective with absolute. Okay, morality, the true definition of morality, relates to absolute morality. But objective morality doesn't need to be true morality. It can all moralities can be objective as long as we qualify the we qualify things, or we set a fixed point of reference. I know it sounds confusing what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to communicate is that it's not about objectivity when it comes to morality. It's about true definitions. So I have a definition of morality which is related to suffering and well-being. Okay, so if that is the true definition of morality that we can investigate, that morality can be objective. It's not the objectivity the problem. The problem is to figure out what is the true definition of morality. But if we are to have a conversation and have any kind of resolution or make sense of things, we need to start trusting effective reasoning. In other words, reason and empirical evidence. For example, it's completely insane to say that God punishes people for eternity for things that he made them in essentially do. Okay, and he's still just. Okay, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make reasonable sense. That is what I'm trying to say. So in order to
Okay, Socrates Son,
yes, please, please, sorry.
that's because points don't get lost in the debate, right? So let me respond to your 2 points. Then you can make a further point, or you can respond to the points I debate, right? Okay, so I'll respond to your 2 points that I made that seem to be points basically. One of your points was that basically the claims about morality you are making, right? They are reasonable. They are not absolute, but they are reasonable. I think you're confused between two things, right? I agree that empirical evidence and logical reasoning are important. What we disagree on is whether logical reasoning includes subjective value judgments. I agree. This is a point we disagree on. Why? Because at the end of the day, subjective value judgments are worthless. They are not arguments. They are subjective. And this is another mistake I think you were making. You were claiming that multiple moralities can be objective. I don't think they can be. I mean, think about this. Suppose there are two types of moralities. One is, let's say, liberal morality, and another is Socrates Son morality, right? The one you mentioned, the example you gave. One has murder being wrong, and other has murder being right. They can't be objectively both correct. They can't be. It's just simple logic, otherwise, it's a contradiction. So, objectivity matters. Secondly, uh, objectivity matters in this regard, firstly. Secondly, I think you're confusing logical reasoning, what you're calling logical reasoning, with subjective value judgments. You are claiming there's a distinction between arguing from absolute certainty and arguing from basically the point you are making about morality. There is a distinction, but that distinction is not between these two things. That distinction is between having objective absolute proofs and probable proofs. It's not between basically the type of argument you are making and absolute proofs. The point you are making is neither. It's neither objective, as it's neither an absolute proof. It's neither a probable proof. It's just based on subjective value judgments. And you can have objective arguments that are probable. I'll give you one example, right? The argument for impossibility of an actual infinite. There are multiple arguments for beginning of the universe with regards to infinity, right? One of them is argument for impossibility of an actual infinite. Now, this is not a certain argument, but at least it's probable, and it's not based on value judgments. Whether you agree with it or whether you disagree with it, there is no value judgment involved. For example, in the case of Hilbert's Hotel. But in the case of the moral claims you are making, there is subjectivity involved. Because there is subjectivity involved, the argument doesn't work. It's not even probable then. You don't need absolute deductive arguments. You can have probable arguments. But those probable arguments have to be based in at least something objective. If they are pure subjectivity, that doesn't work. You can respond.
Yeah. Okay. So uh, let me make a statement, and you will tell me whether that is an objective statement. Okay. So according to Socrates' Son religion, murder is good. Is this a subjective or objective statement?
Okay, there are two things here. Whether murder is good or not, that is a subjective statement. But whether you believe murder is good or not, or whether the Socrates religion has murder as good or not, that's an objective statement. It is like saying whether Jesus believed he was God or not is an objective fact, and whether Jesus is God or not, right? Although that is also objective. I think I'll come up with a better example, but suffice to say, here's a very simple point. Whether murder is right or wrong, right, that is subjective. Whether you believe murder is right or wrong, that's an objective fact. This is how I would put it.
Okay, you are right. That's why. Yes, but you are making a inference to true morality, which you assume is your definition of morality. So what you are doing is you assume your definition of morality is true, and then make an inference in this, like a secular argument. But let me repeat my statement again, and be careful in my exact words. I didn't say, tell me if what I'm saying now is the true morality. What I actually said is the statement. So, the statement, according to Socrates' son's morality, religion, murder is good. So, my statement, not morality, the definition of morality, but the statement, according to Socrates' son's religion, murder is good. Is this statement objective?
Yes, that statement itself is objectively correct.
Okay.
I agree with this. But I would like to point out one more thing here. It's not that I'm assuming an Islamic morality here. I'm not making an argument in this case. Problem of evil itself, that argument assumes some sort of liberal morality, at least since liberals are making it and atheists are making it. It's not me assuming Islamic morality because I'm not making an argument here. And the same would be the case of in case of Kalam or fine tuning of any of the theist arguments, because in that case, burden of proof would be on the theist side, because the theist is making the argument. Here, the atheist is making the argument. They are assuming their own type of morality. So that would be my response to that part. You can continue.
Yes. Okay. So I conceive that you didn't directly say. Okay, is you are just testing whether secular morality can be objective or not. This is what we are doing. But let's assume in a possible world. Okay, let's make a hypothesis. And let's assume the true definition of morality was reducing unnecessary suffering and promoting well being. Imagine a world where this was the true definition of morality. When I say something related to this, that something can be objective. Obviously, yes, for the same reason, like my statement was objective. In other words, what I'm trying to communicate, my dear friend, is that it's not about objectivity, it's about true definitions. So if we assume my definition of morality is true, if I compare things uh, against this definition, that means that things can be objective comparing to my definition of morality. So the thing left now is not about objectivity, it's about to define what is the true definition of morality. So this is what I'm trying to communicate. So it's not about things being subjective or objective, it's about things being true or not.
World, liberal morality was objective and correct, right? Would this argument work? Certainly, yes, it would. But it's in a possible world, right? As far as the argument is being made, it's just purely subjective because unless you can give any reason, any reason, right, for it being objective, then it's subjective. There is no distinction between true morality and objective morality. I think this is a false distinction you are making. If something is objective, it's true. If something is true, it's objective. There is no distinction here. There are no three options here. There are only two options. Either something can be objective or it is subjective. If you think there's a third option, okay, argue for it. But as
Yes.
far as I
So
can see, and I think most people will agree with me on this issue.
yes. Okay. So you said that if in a possible world it could have been objective. If in a possible world, what I said of morality being true, it was in fact true, it could have been objective. But how we break down a possible world to the real world? When we investigate what is the true definition of morality. So I think we agree now that it's not about objectivity, it's about true definitions. So that is when it comes to objectivity. But nevertheless, I know. Okay, so this kind of moral theory or
Can I just
argument.
make one point? Okay,
le-
we don't agree on this issue because,
Okay,
as I said, objective. If something is objective, it's true. If something is true, it's objective. Objective and true are the same things. They are not different things. So, this point is something I think we disagree on. But
okay.
if I think we have discussed this enough, so you can move forward with the next point.
Of course, you are right, sir. We can agree to disagree. And let me make something clear. These kind of arguments are not popular arguments. I make these arguments. So my interlocutor doesn't, and he responds very well. He doesn't, on the spot, he cannot. Okay, he responded very well in what I've said. So let's put that aside if we cannot find a resolution for that issue at the moment. So I will make an argument right now. referring to just to reason and logic, okay, and evidence. So, if God is, first of all, God is able to do evil for a greater good, isn't that right? I don't know whether. So, for example, God orchestrates the evil we see in this world, isn't that right? God
Socrates,
orchestrates.
can you just repeat last 20 seconds?
Yes, okay. So in the Islamic worldview, this world is a test. That implies that God orchestrates evil in this world for a test. Okay, so God is able to do individual evil acts for a greater good. Isn't that right?
Islamically, God is not doing anything evil. For example, I'll just give one example, right? And you can tell me whether I'm misrepresenting you or not. What the type of argument you would be making, that a person kills someone, right? It's wrong. God kills someone, that is wrong as well. So God would be doing an evil thing possibly for a greater good. Is this the type of argument you are making?
Yes, but exactly. My point is that a God might how you say initiates or what is the word anyway. So God, or let's say orchestrates, although it's not the right word, begins, how can you say, initiates evil in this world for a greater good. But so the what he in fact doing is not allowing evil. That is the wrong word, because theists used to say that God allows evil for a greater good. That's wrong. God orchestrates evil in this world for a greater good. But that means that God can do individual acts of evil, but the total sum of his acts are good. But that means that God can do individual acts of evil. Okay, but the sum of these actions lead to a greater good. Is that right? That is common sense, I think. So instigates, that is the right word. So God instigates individuals act of evil, like for example torturing and murdering children. Let's be absolutely clear. Children having leprosy, for example. So God instigates these acts of evil for a greater good. For the total sum of his actions potentially is for a greater good, although that is to argue about. Okay, but something we are absolutely certain, that God instigates individual act of evil.
No, actually, Socrates, I disagree with this point, and I'll explain why. Firstly, the point you are making, right? The God would do some evil acts, but would have a net sum of good. This is a Christian argument. I don't think any Muslim would argue this point. Secondly, what God does, right? According to Islam, none of it is evil. So even if they are diseases or viruses, coronavirus, smallpox, or anything similar to about murder, right? Because I think that is a simple and clear-cut explanation on this topic. Let's suppose, and I will just demonstrate with a simple example, that murder is not evil, even according to you in every case, even according to liberal morality in every case. Let's suppose someone kills someone in cold blood, right? Like a serial killer. That is one time a murder is being committed. Let's suppose another time someone kills someone in self-defense. That is another time that murder is being committed, right? You yourself, I think, and most liberals or atheists wouldn't say the self-defense one is evil. You would only say that the one in cold blood is evil, right? So even the same actions among humans is the same humans on the same circumstances are not in different circumstances are not same. One is good even according to you, and another is evil. So I don't think you can make the claim that what God does is evil, or God supposedly killed someone with lightning or through disease. I don't think that's evil. So that would be my response. You can
Yes,
respond now.
yes, you made a very good response. First of all, you put free will inside this, and you say, okay, but it's not disasters are not really evil because it's not consciousness involved. Like for example, a murderer is murdering someone, and you are right. Morality is related to our conscious state. In other words, a lion can never be evil. Okay, so if a lion eats an antelope, let's say, we cannot say the lion is evil because it hasn't got the conscious state to be evil. So you made a very good response. I give you that. You're right. But in the case of God, my dear friend, God is also conscious. God is not a natural force. It's not like he's not ignorant like a lion. So morality, in fact, applies harder to God because God has a complete conscious state than individual. So what I'm saying now is that although in the long run,
Can I just correct one point? I think you misunderstood my position slightly. I'm not. I will make the example of a lion. I'm not saying that a disease or a natural act killing, basically someone is not through the will of God. I am saying God is choosing to have disease or coronavirus or anything kill a person. The reason that's not evil, first of all, again, the reason that can't be proven to be evil or that's not evil is very simple. A human committing a murder, even in two circumstances. In one circumstances, both of us agree that is evil. In another some circumstances, both of agree that is not evil. So the same action in different circumstances can be evil or can be good. So God, if God uses virus to kill a person, that is evil. If God uses virus to kill a person, right? Evil. Or however, murder is good. We have circumstances in which murder is bad. How are you going to argue that in the circumstance of God using virus to kill a person, that is evil? This is just subjective, and this is a problem of evil. It is at the end of the day, it is just subjective. And you don't need absolute certainty. Again, I'll make this point clear. You don't need absolute certainty for an argument to work. It would be wrong of me to say that because that's me making a subjective value judgment. You can have probability based arguments, but that probability at least has to have some level of objectivity. If it doesn't, then we might as well argue which flavor is better, vanilla or chocolate. It's just a waste of time then. You can respond.
yes. First of all, my argument, I guess now I understood, although I missed some words you said because you were interrupting at some point. I hope, I don't know, maybe you can repeat those a little bit later. But what I said is I didn't say that God is evil. I said he's able to do individual acts of evil, but the total sum of these acts are good. So God, I didn't say God is evil. So I assume that God is good. Okay, because the total sum of his actions and his intention is for a greater good. That makes God good. But that doesn't mean he is not able to do individual acts of evil. So, for example, when God allows a system where children can be abused, for example, although he's doing that for a greater good, therefore he is good in the total sum of his actions, that doesn't mean he didn't instigate it individual acts of evil. Okay, I think we agree on that. It's exactly what you said right now.
Socrates son, it's not what I said. In fact, it's actually a misunderstanding of what I said because, again, I'll take your example of children being abused in the system, right?
Okay.
And now, what I'm not saying is that God is allowing something evil to happen or God is doing something evil for a greater good. This is not what I am saying. I am saying nothing that God does is evil. So, if God is allowing, for example, children to be abused in a system, that is not evil. That's the Islamic position, because evil and good our God allows. And again, you are claiming that God should have a higher standard of morality than us, but what you are doing when you say that is you are assuming that God should be judged on the same criteria that humans are judged. And why? Why would God be judged on the same standard that humans are judged? That's just at the end of the day a subjective value judgment. Now, for example, let's just take the example of children being abused. Why can't God have that as a test for the children? This is just one example that comes to my mind. There can possibly many other reasons for that. You can't say
Okay.
that
Okay.
action is evil. Islam is the good.
You are cutting off, my dear friend. You are cutting off.
This might apply to the Christian world.
My dear friend, you are cutting off, unfortunately. Can you repeat the last 2 minutes?
God Christian theology.
My dear friend, you were cutting off the last 2 minutes. So I understood your point. So what you said essentially, can you hear me first of all? Muhammad, can you hear me? Mohammed, can you confirm you are hearing me right now? Because we had some connection problems. So, hoping I'm being heard right now, I will continue. What Muhammad said is essentially that Islamic morality is deontological. Deontology comes from a Greek word, deontologia, and it means something like it's not related to real consequences of actions in the real world, but it's related to some kind of instructions and system in a sense that is kind of arbitrary in my sense. If morality is not related to real consequences of actions in the real world, that is okay. That is that is a moral system, but it's not. In my estimation, that is not objective. That is an arbitrary system. Be-
So Socrates, the last 2 minutes there was an internet problem. So can you just repeat?
yes, my dear friend, we have internet problems. I lost what you said the couple of minutes. You want to repeat what you said? Although I got the main point, I lost what you said, the couple of
I'll
minutes of
just
what you
repeat it
said.
one more time. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So here was the point I'm making. I think you slightly misunderstood my position regarding God doing good and evil acts. Right? What you were saying that God can basically do some individual evil acts for a greater sum of good. but there will be an overall greater sum of good. I am saying that's not the Islamic position. Islamic position is God does not evil acts. So, for example, God allowing a system, God basically creating a system or causing a system to exist in which children get abused. Just to give one example, it's not an evil act according to us because God, by definition, does not evil. In fact, what is good and evil comes from God. It doesn't come based on some criteria that is absolutely independent from God. It doesn't work like that Islamically. Secondly, the point I was making it, even the same agent are human, right? Killing two people, one in the case of cold, right? So, for example, what I think you are doing and what atheists generally do, they are saying that when a human sets up a system where children get abused, or God sets up a system where children get abused, they are both the same. They are both evil. I'm saying it doesn't work like that. If the system is intended to be a test for the children or for the adults, right? Then that system where children get abused, that is caused by God to exist, that is not evil. This is the Islamic position. I think both of us should now give closing statements because we have been debating for an hour, right? So, do you want to give the first closing statement, or should I give the first closing statement?
Okay, I can go on and give the first closing statement. So, what Mohammed first of all, I'm very impressed with how efficiently Mohammed was able to answer my question, although they are not common questions somebody finds online. But nevertheless, he was very quick to understand what I said, and he made very efficient answers. Now, the last point he made is like, in a sense, whatever God demands, it becomes moral by definition. That is some kind of the ontological ethics. What is the ontological ethics? It holds that at least some acts are morally obligatory, regardless of their consequences to human welfare. And that is exactly my point. That is Islamic morality is not doesn't care about human well-being, good or bad. It's just abstract rules God makes in an abstract way, so not relating to real consequences of actions in the real world. That's why we see Allah being tolerant to enormous suffering He inflicts to humans in the afterlife. He's tolerant to suffering we see in this world, which is sadistic and random, and still calls all that just. But but the question is, is he really just in a secular, reasonable way, or he's just declaring himself just because by definition whatever he says is just, and that is the problem. The problem I notice with Islamic morality that we see play out in this world. Okay, we see radical groups doing immoral acts, claiming that those acts are moral just because the Quran said so. Okay, that is in fact bringing evil in this world and naming it good, and that is the moral problem I see with Islam. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll start my closing statement now. I'll keep it short. So I think basically it was a good discussion. I enjoyed it, and I haven't debated in a month or so. So I'm glad to finally be debating this topic. I was really interested in debating this topic for quite some time. Yeah, it was a nice discussion. I think one thing I will disagree with, because at the end, in the second part of the debate, right, Socrates said basically that God is having people being punished for essentially no reason. I disagree with that, and the simple reason is that Islamically people do have a choice. Even though the qadar of Allah is involved, still there is a choice there involved for the human. So that is the point we disagree with, or that I would disagree with seriously. Other than that, I think people heard our position. the audience listening, they heard both our position. I think both positions were argued for clearly and precisely. So yeah, that's my closing statement. By the way, Socrates son, I was thinking that the next week we are debating Darwinian evolution, right?
Yes.
Uh, I was thinking the week after that we can do a debate who has the moral high ground, Islam or liberalism,
Very good. Very
because
good.
that that relates to some of the points made here today. That basically they need their own debate.
Very.
They can't be discussed.
I agree, and I enjoy very much talking to you because you have very clear reasoning. You have clear, and you don't obfuscate the questions. You are direct and targeted, and you don't obfuscate questions. You are not avoiding questions. You are responding directly. Thank you very much, sir. And I agree. The very good
Okay.
subject.
Okay. This debate is basically recorded, right, on Clubhouse. So you can use Screenomatic or something else like that to record the debate, and we'll both, inshallah, upload these on our channels.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. I have to go now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.